Good afternoon, everybody. It is Council Cabinet on Wednesday, the 6th of October. We'll go straight to the agenda. Apologies, I believe Councillor Williams, Councillor Smale and Councillor Poulter. Anybody else? I don't believe so. Okay. Item 2, late items. There aren't any. Item 3 is receipt of petitions. I'm not aware of any. 4 is identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply. I'm not aware of any. Item 5 is any declarations of interest. Take that as no. Normal rules apply. If you do realise there's something you need to tell us about, then do that at the appropriate time in the meeting. Item 6, to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of September 2021. Moved. Thank you. Okay. Okay, item 7 are recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board. Normal protocol applies. We'll deal with them on an agenda-by-agenda basis. Councillor Repton is here. I'll ask him if he wishes to give us an overview of the recommendations per item. And so if we move forward to key decisions, it's item 8, which is Derby Bus Service Improvement Plan Update. I believe, Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is an update report following the Cabinet's commitment in June of this year to work to create an enhanced partnership for our bus services and to develop a bus service improvement plan in line with the government's Bus Back Better national strategy that was published back in March of this year. The timescales around this work are very, very tight. Government expect these enhanced partnerships to be in place by April next year. And so work has been taking place with our operators and passenger reps and some local employers based on our existing partnership relationships and using the initial 100,000 of allocated funding the government gave us to do that work to develop this, what is a draft bus service improvement plan. It very much is in development and is still a draft, and that's really important to reflect that. The partnerships, the enhanced partnerships, will form the basis of all government future funding and support to local areas, so are really important for Derby to have that mechanism to allow that funding to come through. And they will focus on things like the reliability of services, priority measures around supporting particular access from particular places, opportunities around carbon reduction and customer satisfaction around the bus service across the board. And clearly in Derby's case, this work links really well into our Transforming Cities programme. So this report is really some of the key steps, asking members to approve these key steps. We are including a memorandum of understanding to recognise the cross-boundary working we need to have in place around the partnership. Clearly our buses go beyond the city boundary. And to accept the second phase funding from government of £117,975 to enable us to do the next part of the work we need to do, and to agree the principles in this draft plan, but recognise there'll be further engagement and consultation with residents and citizens across the city, and to delegate acceptance that the future funding will be also accepted, but also to finalise the submission of this improvement plan for submission by the end of this month. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any Cabinet members who wish to comment at this stage, or are you happy for me to bring in Councillor Repton to give us an overview of the scrutiny recommendations? Okay. Councillor Repton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You'll see the Executive Scrutiny Board recommendations in front of you, and I think my members feel it's all well and good to have a high-level strategic plan, but unless this is linked to the real world and local people's real experiences, it's meaningless. It's great to have bus stops with electronic information, but it's useless when there's no bus stops and no buses. And there are a number of communities in this city that have no access to a local bus. I can only cite my own ward as one example in Darley Village, where many elderly, disabled and people without cars have been left stranded in the village because of the topography of that village. Now the 17A has been withdrawn. And so the recommendations before you are to urgently identify those communities like Darley, and there are others as well, that will be negatively affected by the lack of a local bus service, and to formulate plans to address this deficit. And then also to agree that the committee was disappointed that there hasn't been any meaningful consultation with the public or bus passengers, even though this was a recommendation from June supported by Council Cabinet. The Executive Scrutiny Board recommend that to Council Cabinet that future consultation seeks to engage with people who are not yet bus passengers, as well as those who are, and to consider the needs for enhancing routes along the corridors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. Are there any contributions or questions from opposition leaders? Councillor Skelton.
Thank you. Similar to what Councillor Repton said, I think it's fairly common among a number of suburbs in the city where the bus services will currently finish probably 8 o'clock at night. Certainly one route in my ward finishes about 8 o'clock at night and the other about 6 o'clock, which can be quite, certainly the 6 o'clock, difficult for people who are working. If you flexible working hours or whatever, it can be difficult to then get the bus back home. You can get into town if you work in town. But these sorts of things and practicalities really do need to be worked out. In an urban area, we should be able to make it work better than it does.
Thank you. Councillor Shanker, did you indicate to speak?
Yeah, just a brief question. Thank you, Chair. Reading the report, and I'm not too clear whether it's covered, so it may be in the report. But it looks, again, it's a modest spend to come up with a strategic plan, which we have to achieve. But we're, again, using consultants to do this work on our behalf. I know in the past we've had officers who have expertise in this field. They've got local knowledge. They know what the bus service in Derby has been and where there's gaps and holes. Is it absolutely necessary we need to bring in consultants for this work when and if we've got the right people within the council and maybe some partner organisations who can actually do this rather than some external consultants?
And of course, that's a question that we ask regularly, Councillor Shanker. It's a challenge which is certainly something which I'm sure officers hear regularly from us and probably will agree with that. So, Rachel, would you be able to cover that one for us?
Yeah, of course. So the additional funding provided by the Department of Transport is about to procure additional staff and to procure consultants in certain areas where work is not necessarily a component of our existing workforce. So the evidence-based information about some of the detail around traffic patterns and transport modelling, that sort of work is quite specialist. If we can use consultant support to aid and add that additional capacity into the team for that particular pieces of work, then we're using consultants. But clearly the team who we have who are embedded in our council and understand our city and our transport needs is leading this work and directing any of that additional capacity.
Thank you. I'll just pass over to Councillor Pearce if he wishes to flesh this out, but I understand in discussions I've had with him, this is in regards to the exec scrutiny recommendations. Councillor Repton, if you could just concede me one thing, that I don't agree with the first sentence of recommendation 2. However, I believe that the other recommendations we can certainly support. I think I do understand that there's most of this will be covered, or all of it will be covered by the executive partnership, and also there'll be extensive surveys as well to actually look towards local services, such as cited by Councillor Skelton.
Yes, you are correct, Councillor Holmes. Yeah, part of the future work of the enhanced partnership will cover the nitty-gritty as such. The first part of the BSIP wasn't to go into that great detail. It was just to get the ball rolling and get everything like that. But we totally agree with you, Councillor Repton, Councillor Skelton and Councillor Shanker on that. So the enhanced partnership will pick up on all those points. As for the second item regarding the consultation with public, that was never a part of the initial BSIP. That was to consult with the bus companies and a few specified interest groups, such as bus passenger groups. But as this goes along, we will have a full public consultation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. So just to clarify, if that's possible to do, I'm asking Cabinet to agree with executive scrutiny recommendations 1 and 2, but not the first sentence of 2. If there's no more contributions, are we agreed recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Agreed? Thank you. Okay. So moving on to item 9, supporting the delivery of the Eastern Gateway project. Rachel, again, I think you're going to be popular this evening.
Thank you. Or perhaps I get a bit tedious. I do apologise if I am a bit tedious. So this project, really key project for our city centre, part of our overall ambition to reinvent Derby City before the pandemic, and obviously after the impact of the pandemic as well, even more important than ever. It is a really important part of that transforming the high street, and it is a partnership project. So we have, as a council, I'm sure members are aware, received £15 million that have been confirmed through the Future High Streets Fund from government, and there are 3 projects that we are delivering as part of that fund, and one of them is this project. The other 2 are the Market Hall transformation and the connecting works to improve public realm and connectivity and coherence across the centre. This project is about reimagining the Eastern Gateway, so really changing the way that part of the city it works for people to use it. So changing the work with the Derbian, sorry, put Diberian then, the Derbian to improve the access and the support into that, so reimagining the access, creating new public space in that area and having a more improved link to the bus station to city centre. So really about trying to change the way the part of the city looks and feels and works as part of the whole, and really about building confidence in our city centre and changing some of that. And this particular project is absolutely a partnership with the private sector, so working with Derbian, and the funding split between that. The council will use its direct grant through Future High Street, which is the $5,097,000, and the private sector will invest $6 million into making the whole scheme achievable. So a really important partnership. The Derbian will lead the delivery model for this scheme. They will do the design and the construction activity. They will incur costs and then claim those back under a grant agreement with the local authority. Going through the various processes and delivery, there will be regular PMO governance approvals at key stages, and our indicative timetable, the work has obviously gone on the design stage, is that we'll get to a conditional grant agreement in October this year and planning applications submitted in November. So quite shortly we will have the full designs of what's been intended for this site. And then hopefully, if that works well through the process, construction on site starts next autumn with completion in March 24. We are working with the Generation and Housing Scrutiny Panel to share the information as this scheme develops. It's really important to have their oversight of it. And the commercial detail and the model is in the confidential report in the second part of the agenda.
Thank you very much. Councillor Repton?
Yes, Chair. My committee really have a lot of sympathy for officers senior and junior. They have an impossible mission and are valiantly and resourcefully trying their best to revive this city centre. But their efforts have been likened to rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And I don't say that lightly. I think all towns and cities up and down this country have an almost impossible task, almost. We see online shopping, we see out-of-town shopping, we see the pandemic hastening that, and it's becoming more and more difficult. And that's why the recommendations, we believe, we can't have an office junior in the government looking at this problem. And that's why we call on Cabinet in a non-party political manner. And that was Alan Grimmadale's recommendation. We added that to it, which I agreed to. But he fully supports this as well. We write to the government asking for a senior cabinet member. And I named the person. I said, for me, he's not particularly my cup of tea or anything, but somebody like your Mr. Gove to actually be put forward. Somebody who's quite able to actually take on this task to help revive the high streets up and down this country. Because unless you have a senior cabinet member who's actually tasked with doing this and taking it seriously, our towns and cities like Derby will continue to, I think, to struggle. And it needs to be taken seriously. And that's why we would urge you to write to government to give that task to a senior cabinet member to take on. A bit like Michael Heseltine when he took on the task.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. I think that covers the scrutiny recommendations.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, are there some contributions or questions from opposition leaders at all? Councillor Shanker.
Yeah, just a question from me. I mean, it's a welcome report, it's a welcome development on a key strategic site which is in need of significant investment, and this will make a massive, massive improvement to that area. It's a shame we didn't get the full allocation of the Future High Street Fund that we originally bid for, because there's a number of projects which we wanted to deliver, which now, unfortunately for the time being, won't be coming forward. But my question is more around the contribution made from the public purse is significant to this project to make it happen, which is welcome. But is there any ongoing revenue stream to the council from this? Because it's it's land purchase, which we then using this grant to what appears to me then just pass over into the private sector. Have we looked at what deal could be done to make sure the council, if anything, could have an ongoing income from and a return on its investment, given the financial position of our revenue budget?
Rachel or Simon, I'm obviously considering we do have a confidential report to discuss following the main meeting, but I don't know if you can answer that in any detail.
Yes, I mean, part of the question was about sort of ongoing revenue costs. So on that question, obviously the public realm space that are going to be created by this site, the intention is for that to remain in the private sector's ownership, and therefore the maintenance and looking after that site will continue to be managed by the private sector and therefore not picked up by the council. So there's a revenue implication there that won't be covered by the authority, and there will be a private sector investment from maintaining that. In terms of the actual deal itself, I'll refer to my colleague Simon Wright to answer that particular part of the question.
Any comments I'd have, I'd do in confidential session, given the nature of the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification. I mean, I'll just add, Councillor Shanker, that not every investment we make returns specific benefits, financial benefits to the council. Sometimes we make investments for the GVA, the gross added value. We've discussed that in some detail about proposals for Beckettwell, for example, public-private partnerships. It's about the bigger picture sometimes. I take your point, but what this will bring to the city is significant regeneration in an area that is crying out for it, that specific area. It will bring huge benefits for the city in general. So it's not always about what the council can actually directly receive from it. But you're quite right, it's taxpayers' money, so we have to ensure that we're spending wisely and we have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, as Simon will talk about in the confidential section. Going back to Councillor Skelton, no? No, right. Going back to the scrutiny board recommendations, Councillor Epton, my understanding is that the Minister for Levelling Up Housing and Committees covers high streets. And I think that I would ask Cabinet to note this particular recommendation. Should you feel that strongly about it, or your colleagues or council cross-party colleagues feel strongly about it, then full council may be an avenue you could go down to get cross-party support for some kind of message to go to government. It's been done before by the Liberal Democrats and Labour. I'm sure if you feel very strongly about it, or somebody does within this scrutiny board, then that could be something you could pursue.
Can I just
Councillor
ask,
Repton, thank you. We've had your contribution.
Can I just ask you about that motion? I mean,
it's a recommendation to you, Councillor Repton. It's not a debate. Thank you. It's not a debate. Okay. So if there's no further discussions, I'm asking Cabinet to agree recommendation 2.1. Agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 10, Transforming Cities Update, Mobilityhub. Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is seeking approval to progress with the work the Council is doing under the Transforming Cities programme, members are well aware of, that was obviously negotiated through with the Department of Transport and a business case agreed in strategic outline for that. And this particular report is around the mobility hub, stroke the park and ride. This is not about just a traditional park and ride site, but a much broader opportunity to use this site to support some more sustainable forms of transport, think about charging points and other things that can be included in that hub that will really increase the level of accessibility and connectivity in our city. This report is simply about the acquisition of the site to produce that mobility hub. The site that is being considered seriously here, and the details obviously it's in the report, in the confidential report, but is along the A52, Megalorton Lane and Rainsway corridor as part of the city. And this enables us then to progress that particular site for this mobility hub to enable that to be the next stage in the Transforming Fund and the programme. All costs for that acquisition are funded through the Transforming Cities funding we've had from government, and that includes the purchase of the site and any remediation that needs to be done to that site. And the site has already passed the tests from the DFE around their value for money is compliant with the grant award. So this is really about asking committee and council cabinet today rather to approve the acquisition of this site. And the detail, some of that detail is within the report on the other part of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to note this report. Do we have any questions or comments from the opposition leaders on this item at all? No? I think before we move on then, I would say that actually one of the things in here, because this is within my portfolio and it's a very, very exciting prospect. I think as time goes on, the public will learn a lot more about what mobility hubs are, and actually park and ride is probably a description that will probably morph into something else actually, because thinking about traditional park and rides isn't what it's going to be really in the future. It's going to be something far different. So it's great that this is being brought to Cabinet to pursue it. I'm very excited about seeing more of the Transforming Cities funding being used for this transformation that we need to make towards sustainable transport, and of course to contribute to our commitment to climate change. If there are no other contributions, then I'll ask Cabinet to agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Agreed? Thank you. Okay, moving on to contract and financial procedure matters. Item 11. Is it Rachel or is it Simon? I can't recall. Simon, thank you.
11 is the housing carbonisation.
Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund?
Oh, I've skipped one. I do apologise. So I'll say that again. Item 11 is bid to the Social Housing Decarbonation Fund, authorisation to bid for Wave 1 funding. Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Quite a theme here around the level of government funding for particular projects that are obviously important to our city, so interesting. But this report is asking members, as has been stated, to approve or also to accept and to bid for funding through this new fund launched by government in August this year. This is part of the government's clean growth strategy and is about supporting clearly climate change ambitions as a country and supporting energy efficiency in our housing stock. The bid is for up to £946,093 from government for work to raise the energy performance, particularly of low EPC rated social housing. This is the first wave of funding. There are likely to be three further waves of funding to tackle this really important issue around housing and climate change and carbon reduction. The first phase, this phase is targeted to the worst properties that have EPC ratings of D or below, and to bring them at least to C, although if they have a G rating, they can be a D, but generally to get them to a C rating around EPC. And the grants are determined by the level of EPC rating a particular property would have. We've done some clear work, identify where we can use this in the most positive way. We have 80 properties identified. 79 of those are in Band D and one of those is in Band E. A portion of those properties are our cast iron properties in the Derby Homes stock that are non-traditional construction and solid walls and very difficult to insulate in normal sort of terms. So it's really good to have additional funds to do that work more effectively. The approach is to use these funds to target these properties, but at the same time to work with residents locally in those communities to offer advice and access to green grants in our normal approach to energy efficiency across the board in those neighbouring owners, so we get more benefit than just property we're going to be hopefully getting the funding to improve. Financially, the grant fund is the council contributes a third of the installation costs, and the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, will meet that. It's part of our existing business plan to improve energy efficiency in this stock anyway. And the bid has been encouraged to be put through the regional energy hub as a more effective mechanism for government to receive these bids. So it will be being put through the Midlands Energy Hub as a way of filtering it through to government. And just for members' information, there's additional bid going in, not through the council, but through the Energy Hub for Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing, who are a key social housing provider in the city, and they will be putting forward a further 80 properties as well for funding to bring those properties up to a more effective energy efficiency standard. So really it's just to ask the members to approve the submission into that Wave 1 funding application, and then if it's successful, delegate authority to accept the grant and to enter into an MOU and various other arrangements to accept the grant conditions and a collaboration agreement with Derby Homes to complete the proposed project, and then obviously to add that to the HRA capital programme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Repton to give an overview of the scrutiny recommendations, and I'll bring in Councillor Webb and I'll ask for any questions or comments after that, if that's okay. Councillor Repton. Yes,
at the committee last night, we were told there was a shortage of insulators to do the work, and the suggestion, half tongue-in-cheek but half serious, was do we need to add these to the list of turkey pluckers, abattoir workers, petrol drivers, tanker drivers, and ask for a temporary visa for EU workers to be able to come in to do this work, to make sure it's done. I say it was half tongue-in-cheek, it was half serious, because if not, we need to find these workers from somewhere, because the work needs to be done, and we can't leave it forever and a day. So, yes, you'll see the recommendation there, Chair, over and above that point for Cabinet to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. Councillor Webb.
Yes, Chair. I'm always keen to accept government funding. I'm also keen to accept recommendations from executive scrutiny that we're already dealing with. So I'm pleased to say that identification of the stock which we thought was likely to be a lot worse than the figures show, only 80 properties, and those particular properties, as Rachel has said, have their own issues, and this will give us the opportunity to get those properties back in. It's always our policy to, when we bring houses into our stock, to have them at least EPC rated at C or above. So that's our target. And with regard to getting people in the building trade, Councillor Repton will know that Derby Homes has a well-recognised apprenticeship training scheme and works with colleges and the university and with our social care team to develop apprentices through the Derby Homes scheme, and we do give preference to looked after children when leaving care. So yeah, I'm encouraged by the support, the recommendations from exec scrutiny, but we're doing that already and we can only enhance that.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Skelton.
Well, that's definitely good to hear that Derby Homes has for many years had apprenticeship programmes. So obviously that might mitigate our risk exposure to labour shortages. But there is also at the moment materials shortages. I was only talking to some people in the building trade a few days ago who were saying that this is obviously an issue, just getting hold of stuff, and the length of time it's taking to get hold of stuff, and also the actual cost increases, something like 20% and that sort of ballpark figure for materials. So has that been taken into account with obviously the number of houses we're hoping to do? Because obviously if it's going, materials are increasing in cost, that might have some implications. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. Rachel
Yes,
or
I mean,
Councillor Webb?
To the best of our ability to be able to assess prices and costs, those have been incorporated into the project plan, absolutely.
Councillor Webb?
Yes, our new build director is currently chair of East Midlands consortium for purchasing materials, and we did that work before the pandemic to avoid situations like this where we get unexpected cost increases. We are seeing problems, but with having that consortium and the power within that consortium to purchase materials, those issues are greatly reduced. They haven't gone away, but are greatly reduced.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Webb. Are there any more questions or contributions from opposition leaders or Cabinet members? No? Okay, good. So we're going to be asking Cabinet to agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.2. Are we agreed? Thank you. Good. Okay. Item 12, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. This is Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the standard report at each Cabinet. There's 3 items on it tonight. The 3 items are the South Derby Growth Zone, Project Assemble and the Deerfield Children's Home capital bid. So the South Derby Growth Zone, all members will be aware, is a really fundamental area on the edge of our city, and also will reap its potential through the development of the A50 junction and Link Road. Back in June, there was an opportunity for the highways authorities, so effectively ourselves and Derbyshire County Council, to submit a bid for levelling up funding to help unlock that development, and by implication unlock what is detailed in 4.1 in terms of the South Derby Growth Zone, the Garden Village, the strategic housing sites, the IPD and everything else. So it's a really important site. In order to be ready, because that levelling up bid was really a strategic case for change, we need to develop the work to develop it into a business case which was more complete and would be required to progress the next stage of the levelling up fund bid, which we haven't heard the outcome of that yet. The partners in here, the City Council, the private sector, Derbyshire County Council and Homes England have all agreed to fund development of this up to, or are all willing to make contributions. We're being asked tonight for the Derby City contribution in order to progress this forward to the tune of 349,000, of which our contribution would be 99,000, of which we'd use levelling up capacity funding money, for the purpose it was intended, to reduce our cost down to 37.5 thousand. This is one of the areas where I think if the government does give the levelling up funding, it will be a major unlocking of that strategic site. There will be benefits to the city in terms of business rate growth, council tax growth, as well as all the other benefits of economic growth. So the recommendation is to approve that. The second aspect is in respect to Project Assemble, which is the site currently occupied by the vacant Assembly Rooms building. This is asking for approval for a net 142.5 thousand to support the completion of the options appraisal and outline business case for that site. That is required as one of the conditions of the planning committee, which met, which does state that in order to move this forward, one of the conditions that the planning committee said was that we needed to be in a position in demolition to have a development agreement, i.e. future use of that site. The money is to develop it to outline business case stage, which will help to secure or identify public and private sector funding, and includes a variety of professional inputs, including property advice, which will look at land use options, appraisal, viability assessment, soft market testing, outline procurement advice, as well as developing some initial REBA stage design developments. And the report details that as part of the city centre and as part of the cultural heart of the city, there would be a desire option for us to consider it's part of the use of that site for a cultural purpose, including the potential relocation of Derby Theatre from the Derby Centre to that site. The university, as you can see in the report, are looking at that in conjunction with us, and that will be developed alongside the professional input in terms of viability assessments, option appraisals. Just to make it clear that this site is likely to need public and private sector investment to bring it forward, and this is an absolute prerequisite to be able to go out and identify, secure and engage with funders, whether it be private sector in terms of the overall viability, public sector in terms of bringing forward uses on the site. Without that, we would be in a situation where it would reach an impasse, because we do need to have that development agreement in order to demolish. And the final area here is in respect of the ability to bid for children's home funding from government in terms of this, and as members will know, increase in looked after children, need for appropriate support in respect of provision, especially within the city, is important, and this is a joint bid as part of the work with D2N to try and improve the capacity and market sufficiency in this area. So the recommendations, Chair, are detailed in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, which is to approve each of these either bids or funding to allow these important schemes for the city to progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Repton, would you like to give us an overview of the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee? Thank you.
Yes, please, Chair. The current administration sadly has a very poor record of delivery regarding their very costly, botched and failed attempt to refurbish and reopen the existing assembly rooms against all expert and officer advice. So why can the public have any confidence that
it's not questions. Can I have the recommendations, please? An overview of the recommendations. Thank you.
Well, you asked for an overview.
I'm asking for an overview of the recommendations that
I'm
are
giving you
in this
one.
report. Well, go ahead.
Well, if you will allow me, the current administration has a poor record of delivery regarding the very costly...
That is not in the recommendations. That's your opinion. Can you please give us the recommendations?
You asked me for an overview.
Please?
You asked me for an overview.
Would you like me to read the recommendations?
No.
Okay.
But why don't you allow me to do an overview as I have previously?
The recommendations as listed here, give me an overview, please.
You're afraid of the truth?
I don't want questions.
Okay.
It's not, you need to present the overview of the recommendations, please. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, the executive scrutiny were very concerned that in actual fact it's not 124,500, it's £240,000 for consultants' fees. And these are consultants' fees being spent at a time when services are being cut and jobs are potentially being lost. And my committee were asking, is this a good way of spending public money when the previous attempt to reopen the assembly rooms wasted millions of pounds of public money? And so we've asked these questions, that the appraisal process is completed within a 12-month period, and it will provide the public with a fully costed, fully funded, comprehensive business plan demonstrating that the £250,000 worth of consultants' fee are good value for money. And a multi-million-pound scheme is the best we can achieve for the city. And the Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that no further taxpayers' money is spent on this particular scheme until proper commitment for capital investment has been obtained from Derby University or from other suitable sources. That's the one I want to speak to at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Is that it? You're getting one chance to put all the recommendations forward, so if you don't speak now, you won't get another opportunity?
Well, a bit like North Korean style. I'm stopped from speaking the truth, but I'll leave it at that. There's plenty to go up there, Chair.
Okay. Before I open it up then, I'll put my thoughts on the recommendations as printed here, which are a bit more specific and to the point than Councillor Repton's contribution there. On recommendations 1 and 2, we've got planning consent with conditions in regards to the demolition, and we're going to focus on the future use and regeneration of the assembly room site. You know, the options appraisal is a vital first step in that journey. It's to explore and inform on the options that this Cabinet, this Council needs to take in a vital area of the city. We're going to follow due process, we're going to take officer advice, but we don't know at this stage what financial options of funding or mix there will be, private, public or mixture, as the officer has suggested. So I think that covers recommendations 1 and 2 in my view, which I are recommending Cabinet not to agree to. On recommendation 3, you know, every effort was made to bring the assembly rooms back into use. The cost has proven to be prohibitive, and again, planning permission with conditions has been granted for demolition. So I think that deals with recommendation 3 as well. So I wouldn't accept, I'd ask Cabinet not to accept that as well. So do we have any contributions and questions from opposition leaders? Councillor Skelton.
Thank you. Just particularly on the South Derby growth zone, it's good obviously to see that that's making some progress. I read with interest that there's a Infinity Garden Village liaison group that's been set up. Obviously, the surrounding area will be affected, traffic, etc., by when that development happens. And I understand councillors from Sinn Féin are involved in that. But it also impacts upon my ward, which is next door to Sinn Féin. And we have not been invited to be involved. So I would ask that we are, because certainly one of the main roads going through my ward will be noticeably affected regarding traffic. So I feel that we do need to have an input into that.
Thank you. Councillor McChrystal.
I'll make sure you're invited to the next meeting. It's also Trelliston Ward councillors are involved. Okay.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Chair. Several points to make. I'll try being as quick as I can, and hopefully you'll let me finish. First point is a relatively modest amount, 37.5k. That's here for Cabinet approval. Can I just ask, when I finish, if the monitoring officer could just clarify the delegated authority for the various approval levels of funding, because I think that would be quite useful to know and just remind people of. But Project Assemble itself, I mean, we can't even bring ourselves to say assembly room site, and we've had to change the name here. But you mentioned in response to Councillor Repton, we always take officer advice. Well, you didn't take any officer advice at all 3 years ago before you decided to embark on wasting several millions of pounds, and now we've got abortive costs and we've got capitalised costs. And I've said it before, I reckon a lot of them asbestos surveys, by the time we reach a position to demolish the assembly rooms, will have to be done again. To date, we've had no private sector funding in the costs to employ contractors and consultants, should I say. What makes us think we can secure private sector funding in the future? If this was genuinely a joint bid, you know, why aren't some of these partners coming up with money at this stage? The report fails to mention in this open and transparent world, at 4.8 I think it is, where it talks about the attempt to reopen the assembly rooms. It fails to mention prior to that there was a fully funded scheme approved by council to build a new performance venue on that site, which, had you not stopped, would have been well on its way to be delivered. Totally ignore that, totally ignored officer advice and wasted so much money. Scrutiny Board are right in highlighting This isn't £142,000 worth of consultants, it's £240,000 for consultants. Again, in the spirit of being open and transparent, why isn't that clearly demonstrated in the report? And why aren't Cabinet members calling this out prior to even getting to this stage? We know the significant cost pressures this authority is under, and there may be several other authorities under similar pressures, but that's no comfort to any resident in Derby who has had their council tax raised to the maximum amount possible, but then we still face overspends in this year, significant overspends in this year, and then holes of, you know, depending on who you listen to. Is it 20 million next year? Is it 27 million next year? Is it 29.2 million next year? I've heard all of those figures, all from reliable sources. And let's just take a moment to reflect on what that actually means. If we don't get bailed out, this means significant job losses to employees, hard-working employees who have given so much over the last many years, let alone just this last year and a half during the pandemic. I make a rough calculation. I'm not scaremongering here, but this could
This is speculation, Councillor Shanker. This is not based on...
Can you listen to me? I never thought I'd say I'm missing Chris Poulter, but...
No, Councillor Shanker, you have to be very careful.
This isn't speculation. This is...
You're throwing numbers around. You're throwing potential redundancies around. That's not sensible.
It is sensible. It's accurate. It's information I've received from senior officers in briefings. If you want to continue denying that, Matt, until another couple of months' time when you're going to have to come clear, that's up to you. That's a decision you can take, but you're not going to stop me from mentioning it here. The figure I've worked out, very simply from the level of savings, this could mean anything from 300 up to 500 job losses. And that's really worrying.
Is that what you proposed, Councillor Shanker?
That's really worrying. No, this is what you're going to be faced with. You just need to wake up and smell the coffee. You can try shutting me down. It's up to you. I'll stop speaking if that's what you want, because I suspect in a couple of minutes' time, you'll all just put your hands up and accept these recommendations as printed. You'll not even be, you're not prepared to listen, let alone act on some of this advice. It's shocking. It really is. And this is mismanagement over the last 3 years, what has brought us to this position. If you want to deny them figures, if you want to tell me I'm wrong in them figures, please do so.
I'm failing to understand what this has got to do with Project Assemble.
I'll tell you what this has got to do with Project Assemble. I'm just going to move on to that now. If I was running an organisation with such a bleak future financially, I would stop and I would fix the situation. You don't continue spending £250,000 in consultants knowing next year you've got a £20 million black hole to fill. It's just absolute nonsense. And I think my recommendation here would be you stop doing this, you go line by line through the budget, you fix the budget problem, and then you start doing some of these projects. You've heard today you've got no alternative income to actually deliver this project, so why are we spending another £240,000 on top of the millions you've wasted on that site already? I'll leave it at that, but something for you to reflect on. Like I say, I expect you to just nod this report through. But I think you really need to take it a little bit more seriously than that.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Shanker. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been an interesting debate this evening, or this afternoon, whichever one we're on at the moment. I don't think, in terms of Project Assemble, that the costings for this have been given. The justification around that hasn't been given clearly. I think what we've got to remember is that the assembly rooms are sat empty for a number of years. It was left to rot after the previous administration and the fire, and they did nothing with it. The suggestion of a fully costed plan from Councillor Shanker is farcical. Ultimately, that had no allocation of capital funding towards it and no fully costed business case. It did not, I can assure you. You can, by all means, the officers, could you confirm that the previous alternative assembly rooms plan that was put by the previous administration did not have a fully costed business case? It had a cabinet. It had a plan in terms of how to fund it, but there were some questionable figures, if I remember correctly, around the income generated from the parking.
Look, I'm not going to bring officers into this debate. If you want to clarify that, Councillor Shank, if you want to have clarification on that, then we can have those discussions offline.
We can bring that
directly with
clarification
officers as well. We need to stay to the item 12, which is what we're supposed to be debating
Right.
here. Councillor Ralston, if you can continue.
Thank you. As I say, we'll bring that clarification and those details, and this has been gone over many, many times. There's been detailed reviews into it, and this is all historic. The reality is now that we as a council cannot sit there on prime land, on a prime asset of this council, without planning for its future. We have a fantastic opportunity in Beckett-Well, which has replaced what effectively the Assembly Rooms offered the city. And now we have to look at what the Assembly Rooms' future plan is. We have permission to demolish with the relevant points made at the planning committee, which we accept. And therefore, we have to do this in order to come up with the alternative plan for the Assembly Rooms. And Project Assemble isn't about a like-for-like, it's about all the opportunities that could potentially be brought in. In terms of the recommendations, none of which can be approved, because ultimately we can't just halt this and not look at the future. We have to look at all the options, and to do that we need to do this, all the works that have been put into place within this report. So it's important to continue to do that, to look at the future, because I do not want to be the council that in another 10 years' time the Assembly Room sits there with absolutely nothing happening on it. We have to be proactive and absolutely accept that we are in very challenging times. But at the moment, we have to look at the future, because the economic viability of this city relies on regeneration of that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, Councillor Shanker, you may be proposing that we leave the Assembly Rooms to rot and not regeneration, look to regeneration of that area. That might be an option that you want to take. Well, it's not one that we want to take. We have to, as an administration, we have to have options. We have to develop a plan. And the only way that we can do that is by, realistically, the only way that we can do that is by agreeing 2.2 in this report, in my view. It's essential that this area of the city, we take it forward for regeneration. It's crying out for it. Enough's enough now. We need to get towards a proposal, and we can only do that if we have the details in front of us to make informed decisions. This is the first step in the media that I've done on this. We're delighted with the partnership with the university, but obviously these are early days. The caveat to the people of this city is that for far too long they've heard about plans and grand schemes that don't come to pass. Now they're seeing some things actually happen in the city, so confidence is growing that it can be done. But let's not say anything other than these are the first steps. There's a lot of work to do. Everybody has quite rightly said that funding hasn't been secured. But that's not stopped us in the past. If you look at Ocor, our city, our river, huge, a huge amount of money that we, bit by bit, we've secured that money. So it can be done, it will be done. We have determination to do it. We cannot, whether it's us in administration or you or a combination of whoever, will not be able to allow that Assembly Room site to lay dormant in the long term. It cannot be allowed to happen. We have to have a plan, and we have to have a viable plan. So, all that said, if there are no more contributions, if Cabinet can agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Agreed. Thank you. Okay, so item 13 is exclusion of press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you for those who are watching on YouTube. We'll leave you now. Thank you.